What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in today's video we're going to be covering one of the strongest and most dangerous chess openings for black against the move d4, in which we're going to start off with knight f6, and against c4 we're now going to play e6, and against knight f3 we could play the Bogo Indian with bishop b4 check attacking the opponent's king, but with the queen's Indian defense we play the move b6. I really do like this system for black, and so do many of the elite level grandmasters. Really, by playing this move we're making it clear that we want to get our light squared bishop involved, either on b7 or a6. And really where we put our bishop on c8 depends where white puts their bishop on f1. What on earth am I talking about? Well, basically, after a move like g3, looking to fianchetto the bishop, we're going to play bishop a6, really putting some pressure on that c-pawn because this bishop won't be defending it. But if a move like e3 is played, bishop a6 really wouldn't make a ton of sense because it's not providing a threat, as this pawn is already defended. However, against a move like e3, we could simply play bishop b7 and say thank you for the open diagonal. Now, in this position against the queen's Indian defense, there's really four main options from white. The most popular at the grandmaster level by far is g3, looking to fianchetto the light squared bishop. So for the majority of today's video, we're going to cover what to do against the move g3. Now, following this, there are moves like a3 with the Petrosian variation, protecting b4, and eventually maybe even looking to push with b4. There's also the move of knight c3 with the Kasparov variation, and the Spassky system with e3. If you are prepared for these four moves with the queen's Indian defense, I promise you guys that you're going to be very well prepared for whatever comes your way, even against master level competition. Let's first cover the move against g3. Now again, by playing the move g3, white is looking to fianchetto the bishop on g2, so we're now going to play bishop a6, attacking that c4 pawn because this bishop won't be defending it. And there's a few different ways that white can play to defend that pawn on c4, and we're going to cover those later on in today's video, but let's first cover the best option from white of b3. I mean, this is by far white's best move, not making the pieces super cramped and awkward, but simply moving up a pawn and defending that pawn on c4. Now against this, we're not going to play passive chess with moves like bishop e7 or h6, but continue putting the pressure on white with bishop b4 check. And in this position, white may be tempted to play knight bd2, and at least at first sight, this seems like a pretty good move. Whole idea being is that if we ever take this knight on d2, white will simply have the bishop pair. But it actually turns out that knight bd2, as tempting as it looks, is simply a huge mistake because we now have bishop c3. I mean, look at our bishop going into b4, c3, and attacking that rook on a1. Now in this position, white really does need to play rook b1, and as y'all can see, this rook can't even move without being captured because of our dark squared bishop on c3. So in this position, we're going to play bishop b7, rerouting our minor piece, looking to bring it to e4, trapping that rook. And there's really no way for white to stop this in a good way. I mean, even the move queen c2, it does stop the move bishop e4, because after queen takes c3 and knight takes b1, white would be getting two bishops for the rook, and that's not very good for black. But in this position, we don't need to play the move bishop e4, but can simply take that free pawn right in the center of the board with bishop takes d4. I mean, here, guys, we're simply up a pawn, and white really doesn't have anything to show for it. If a move like knight takes d4, taking the bishop, this also isn't good because we simply say thank you for that rook on h1. Now, some players may be tempted to take our minor piece because they see this idea of f3 followed by king f2 and king g1 trapping our bishop. But if you see the move f3, push your h-pawn like there's no tomorrow. Play h5, h4 followed by h3. The whole idea being that against a move like king g1, we can now play bishop g2. We don't need to give up a full piece, but can simply play bishop g2 and get their bishop in return. I mean, in this position, if white does take our bishop, we can take back with our h-pawn, continue with moves like c5 and d5, take full control of the center of the board, and most importantly, we're simply up a piece for a pawn, not to mention a rook on h8, piercing all the way down to that pawn on h2. With a very vulnerable king, honestly, black is simply winning this game. So as tempting as it may look, knight d2 really isn't the best option for white because of bishop c3 attacking the rook, followed by bishop b7 and bishop b4. What about the move bishop d2? Well, against this, we're simply going to draw our bishop back to e7. Now, some of you may be wondering, wait a second, why did we play bishop b4? Just to bring the bishop right back, the very next move, to e7. Well, the reason we did this was to get this bishop on d2 instead of on c1. We would much rather have this bishop on d2 because it does make white's position a little bit more cramped and a little more awkward. I mean, a bishop on c1 could simply fianchetto to b2. This knight can come to either c3 or d2. But now with this bishop on d2, this bishop obviously can't easily get over to b2, and white now has a big decision to make with what to do with these queenside minor pieces. Now from black, following the move bishop g2, looking to really activate this bishop, we're going to play c6 to limit the activity of that bishop so that it can no longer really attack our rook on a8. And now if a move like bishop c3, we can continue with d5. I absolutely love black's position here. Very solid pawn structure with really no weaknesses. This pawn on d5 leading the way, threatening to capture that pawn on c4. So you may see a move like knight e5. I mean, just centralizing this piece and defending that pawn on c4. But against this, we're now going to play knight fd7. Now note, we usually would play knight bd7, but our pawn on c6 would simply be lost. So by playing the move knight fd7, we do attack that centralized knight, and we also keep our bases covered on c6. Now here in this position, white really is forced to take our knight on d7, in which case we're simply going to take back. And now after a move like knight d2, we can castle kingside. And here white may be tempted yet again to play e4. This seems like a very strong move. White simply taking full control of the center of the board, attacking that pawn on d5. But in this position, we don't need to take the pawn on c4 or the pawn on e4, but can play the crazy looking move b5. By doing this, we are putting a ton of pressure on c4 with both of our pawns and our bishop on a6. And really the main question here is, wait a second, why on earth can't white just take our pawn on d5, and then after we take towards the center of the board with c takes d5, just win a pawn? I mean, in this position, white is simply ahead of pawn, but we get huge attacking chances in return. In fact, we can now play b4, attacking that bishop on c3, and notice here after bishop b2, that our bishop on a6 is attacking both e2 and f1, preventing this king from castling kingside. Now we can simply take that pawn on d5, and I really do think that white's best option is playing bishop f1, and I still think that black is simply better following the moves of capturing that bishop and knight f6, but white may be tempted to go up a pawn with bishop takes d5. However, this is simply a huge mistake because of rook e8. Now keep in mind, this king cannot move, and now we have a major piece aimed directly towards the opponent's king. And yet again, if a move like bishop takes a8 is played, we can simply take back with the queen. We are down 3 points in material, but this position is simply crushing for black. I mean, the best move for white here is f3, but even against this, we play bishop g5 check, forcing the king to f2, in which case we play bishop e3 check, and then take that knight. Whole idea being, if white takes our bishop, we have rook e2 check, winning the queen. And if a move like rook g1, trying to give the king an escape square, we can simply play rook e2 check. And really in this position, following either king f1, king h1, or king h3, we have forced checkmate patterns. So really white still needs to take that rook on e2. And as y'all can tell, I mean, this is simply winning for black. So guys, if you're playing the queen's Indian defense, keep in mind that if white plays a move like e4 with your bishop on a6, you may be able to play a move like b5, getting huge counter-attacking chances, potentially even preventing the king from castling at all. Now here, if white does castle kingside, we're simply going to continue with the move f5. Here, white now can play the move e4, so by playing the move f5, we prevent this idea. And really here, we have a stone wall type system with a bunch of light pawns from c6 all the way down to f5. And now we're simply going to play some very easy and fun chess with moves like rook c8. We could also play the move bishop d6. And I do think that this bishop d6 move is a key idea. With this reverse stonewall type system, we do really have control of the light squares, as y'all can tell, but the dark squares are a little bit weak. So by putting our bishop on d6, we also get those bases covered. The very next move, we could play something like queen e7, and if rook c2 here, we have quite a few different options. We could play a move like knight f6, looking to jump into that centralized e4 square. We could play bishop b7, looking to get it to a more traditional square, defending the pawn on c6. We could also play a move like b5 right now, putting pressure on that c4 pawn, and we could even play a move like f4, expanding on the king side. We really do have a ton of flexibility in this position, and it really just depends on your style of play, but I do think that the Queen's Indian defense has a ton to offer for players of all styles. So guys, going back to this first position in which white played the move g3 and we played bishop a6 against the move b3, we're going to play bishop b4 with check against bishop d2, bring that bishop right back, giving white an awkward game here, and if knight bd2, sneak that bishop into c3, and we simply have a one game. Now, how else can white defend this pawn on c4? White could play the move e3, but really by playing e3, the light squares become extremely weak. This bishop is now defending the pawn on c4, and obviously by playing the move g3, white's plan was to fianchetto the bishop. So you're probably not going to see the move e3. I don't think that it's very good. White could also play a move like knight bd2, but I do find this passive. What white could do is play a move like queen c2 or queen a4, defending that pawn on c4. Now against this, I recommend the move bishop b7, followed by an immediate c5. Really by playing this move, we're locking up these c-pawns, and we're simply going to continue to get great counterattacking chances against these pawns for the rest of the game. I do think that white needs to take this pawn, but I mean, let's first go over what happens if white simply plays a move like castling kingside. Against this, we're going to snatch that center pawn using a wing pawn to take that center pawn off the board, and now as y'all can see, we have two center pawns, and white only has one. Now in this position, we're going to snatch that bishop off of g2, and then look to play queen c8 followed by queen b7. A key idea in the Queen's Indian defense, fianchettoing our queen and attacking that king on g2. After a move like f3, we could play bishop e7, and now if rook d1, play a6. I mean, this really does remind me of the hedgehog defense type system in which the black pawns really control the queen side of the board and prevent any of white's pieces from making any type of attacking chances. Here, if a move like bishop g5, that's okay. We'll simply play h6, attacking the bishop. If white wants to take our knight on f6, that's okay. We'll take the bishop right back. And if a move like knight e4, just bring the bishop back to e7. Here, white could play moves like rook d3, followed by rook a d1, and after rook c8, play a move like queen b3, and it may seem as if white has a very good game here. I mean, if I walk past this position at a tournament game, at least at first sight, I would probably think, wait a second, I mean, wow, white has centralized knights right in the center of the board, a battery ram on the d-file, and a queen on b3, and if you look at black's pieces, none of them are even further than the 7th rank, but I personally think that black's position is simply better. We can play a move like rook a7, and as y'all can see, black really doesn't have any weaknesses. Our queen on b7 and rook on a7 really get a grip on that d7 pawn. We have a dark squared bishop that is holding the fort down, and a knight on b8 that soon wants to play knight c6 and trade off for that centralized knight, which is really going to help our position become less cramped. I would say the one weakness we do have is this square on d6, but if white plays a move like knight c2, which by the way has been played 2 times at the master and grandmaster level, black simply plays b5, and black went on to win both of these games. Now following c takes b5, it may be easy for us to play queen takes b5, and I still think that black is better there, but I think better than that is d5, and now we see our 2 pawns in the center versus the 1 pawn really paying off. We're attacking that centralized piece, and now if we move like knight c3, we play knight d7. All of a sudden, white's position is pretty awkward, and we're threatening to play knight c5, forking both the queen and the rook on d3. And if a move like b takes a6 and queen takes a6, we are down a pawn, but now it is black with the attacking chances. I mean, this rook on c8, the battery ram on the a file, putting pressure on a2. The knight c5 idea still remains as a threat, attacking both the queen and the rook. If you plug this into a computer program, it's probably going to tell you that queen b5 is the best option. But against this, we can simply continue by taking that queen, snatching off that pawn on a2, and black simply has a much, much better game here. So yet again, guys, if white does play a quiet move like castling kingside, we're simply going to use our flank pawn to capture that center pawn, capture that bishop on g2, fianchetto our queen, and we're just playing chess. Now what happens if white does take the pawn on c5? Well, now we're going to take back with our bishop, and I really like this line for black as well. I mean, look at our bishop pair really pouncing down on the king side of the board. Following a move like castling kingside, we're going to castle as well. And now if a move like knight c3, play bishop e7. Now, it is true, I was just talking about how active this bishop on c5 was, but we played bishop e7 for the purpose of bringing our knight there. We're going to play knight a6, looking to play knight c5. Usually, we don't want to play a move like knight a6 because a knight on the rim is dim, but in this situation, we're not moving the knight on a6 to keep it there forever, but to really put pressure on both b4 and c5, and on top of that, our bishop continues to control this very important diagonal. I mean, the very next move, let's say white plays something like bishop f4, we play knight c5, attacking that queen, and now if queen c2, we play queen c8, bringing our queen to that open file. And if rook ac1, we now centralize our knight with knight ce4. I mean, look at the journey of this knight on e4. We played knight a6, which seemed like a very strange move, but all of a sudden, we had knight c5 and knight e4, and white is under a ton of pressure here. The best move here for white is knight d4, but against this, we can simply capture that knight on c3, continue with that a6 idea, and now if we move like knight f3, looking to jump their knight into e5, we can play rook d8, and after a move like knight e5, just play d6, kicking that knight back, capture that bishop on g2, fianchetto our queen, and the very next move, yet again, our central pawns pay off. We have two central pawns versus one. We're going to push with d5 with rook ac8 on the way. I absolutely love black's game here. So guys, that really covers the main line of g3 here from white. I mean, against this, we're going to play bishop a6, attacking that pawn on c4, and if white defends it with the pawn b3 move, we have bishop b4 check, and if white plays a move like queen a4, we can play bishop b7, and black has a strong game. What about the move a3, following the Petrosian variation, protecting the square on b4? Well, against this, we can simply play bishop a6, attacking that pawn. And at least when I first saw this move, I was thinking, gosh, this seems really strange. Why can't white just play e3? I mean, this all seemed like very good moves from white, and this bishop a6 move all of a sudden seems very out of place. But the whole idea here is that if e3, we now have d5, now putting pressure on c4 with both our d-pawn and our bishop on a6. White could play a move like knight bd2 or b3, in which case we're simply going to play bishop e7 and castle kingside, and we're just playing chess. And I really don't think that c takes d5 is the best option, because we can now take that bishop on f1 and capture on d5. Whole idea being, after a move like knight c3, we can play queen b7, yet again fianchettoing our queen. And I really think that our advantage here is that our king still has the ability to castle either direction, and the king on f1 obviously can't castle for the rest of the game. I think black is better here. So e3 in the Petrosian variation against bishop a6 really isn't the best idea because of d5. What about the move queen c2? Well, against this, yet again, I like the move c5. I mean, really locking in both of these c pawns, making this pawn on c4 a huge target. And in this position, white really does need to play the move d5. I mean, if white doesn't play d5, we're simply going to take that pawn on d4, continue with bishop c5, attacking that knight, continue to get great counterattacking chances, and I think that black is simply better. Following the move d5, we're going to take that pawn, and following c takes d5, we have to be careful here in not taking that pawn. It may seem like we simply want a pawn here, but now queen e4 check is played, attacking both our king and our knight, and if we try to save our knight, well, white simply wins the rook, and this position is resignable for black. So guys, in this position, do not take that pawn, but simply play the move g6, looking to fianchetto your bishop on g7. I mean, look at the activity of both of our bishops here. I absolutely love this position for white. I mean, following a move like g3, we can play a move like castling kingside, and now with bishop g2, play d6. I mean, this is very good chess strategy on black's part. If y'all notice, our pawns are on dark squares on the queen side of the board with a light squared bishop, and really by doing this, I mean, this light squared bishop barely even realizes that these dark squared pawns are here, and at the same time, on the king side of the board, we have pawns on the light squared and a dark squared bishop, which again really gives our bishop a ton of flexibility. I would say that this is black's biggest edge in this position. I mean, following a move like castling kingside, we can play rook e8, using both our bishop and our rook to really put some pressure on that e2 pawn. And if a move like rook e1, we can play knight bd7. White may play a move like h3, trying to take away that g4 square, but that's okay. We can simply continue to advance on the queen side of the board with b5. I mean, look at these pawns, guys, really clamping down on that fourth rank, making white's job hard. If a move like e4, advancing in the center, we're now going to play queen c8, preparing for bishop f1. I mean, so far white is playing pretty well, putting a pawn in the center of the board, playing bishop f1, trying to attack our queenside pawns, which may seem a little bit overextended, but here we're not going to play passive moves like queen b7 or rook b8, just trying to hold on for dear life, but play the aggressive move b4. And this is a very hard position to play as the white pieces. Whole idea being if a move like knight b5, we can play queen b8, and if a takes b4, it may seem as if white is really starting to mount the pressure on our bishop as well as our c-pawn, but here we simply take that bishop on f1, and as y'all can see, this a takes b4 move was a huge mistake because we take back, and we currently are sitting at even material, but this knight can't move because we would simply win the queen. So here we're simply going to take that knight on c3, be a piece ahead, continue to take that centralized pawn on e4, and this position is resignable for white. So guys, that really covers the Petrosian variation of a3, in which case we can simply play bishop a6, attacking that pawn, followed by c5, locking that c4 pawn into place, continue to naturally develop our pieces, and play very fun and aggressive attacking chess. What about the next two lines of knight c3 with the Kasparov variation, or e3 with the Spassky system? Honestly, I don't think we need to be worried hardly at all about either of these moves. I mean, following something like knight c3, there's a ton of ways that we can play this position, but I don't think that bishop a6 is the best idea, simply because white could play a move like e3 or even e4, advancing in the center of the board and protecting that pawn on c4. I think here we could simply play a move like bishop b4 in Nimzo-Indian type fashion, pinning that knight on c3. And now if a move like bishop g5, fianchetto our bishop, continue with the move like h6. And now after bishop h4, we could play a move like g5, attacking that bishop, followed by knight e4, a very aggressive variation for black, or even a more quiet variation like taking that knight on c3, continuing with d6, and then playing knight bd7. If you guys have ever played the Bogo or Nimzo-Indian, this will look very familiar to you. I mean, the next moves are somewhat obvious. We're going to play queen e7, and now if a move like knight d2, we could play e5, advancing in the center of the board, or even the move g5, kicking that bishop back to g3, and then castling queenside. Maybe this is the aggressive player coming out of me, but I really do like this variation for black. Really what we have here is a race. Black trying to attack in the center and the king side of the board, and white trying to attack on the queen side. But I mean, after a move like a4, we simply play a5, locking this side up. And now if a move like e4, play e5, fighting for the center. And if a move like rook e1, we're going to play h5, followed by rook dg8. Look at these rooks. I mean, just pouncing down on the white camp. h4 and g4 ideas in play. I love black's game here. And guys, going back to this position, last but not least, we have the quiet move of e3. Yet again, just like knight c3, I really don't think that we have a ton to worry about. We can just play bishop b7, and now after bishop d3, play d5. A ton of players love to play bishop b7, d5, followed by bishop d6. And as y'all can see, our bishop pair is pouncing down on the king side of the board. White needs to be extremely careful here, but if white does play this pretty much perfectly after a move like knight c3, we can simply continue with castling kingside, play knight bd7, and now after a move like bishop b2, we would like to play queen e7, but knight b5 could be played, winning the bishop pair. So here we're going to play a6, preventing this knight from coming to b5, and then play the move queen e7, and black has a very solid game here with the queen's Indian defense. If you'd like to hear more on the theory behind the Vienna game, click the video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about the hippopotamus defense, a fun and strong chess opening that you can play with either side, click the video to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.